The first is that it's the decision by the Home Secretary was in breach of the Home Secretary's own prescription policies in terms of how it makes balanced judgments. But I think, secondly, far more significantly, was the fact that it said that the ban disproportionately infringed upon legislation, crucially the UK Human Rights Act, in terms of provisions that protect freedom of expression and freedom of association. But I think it's also really crucial to look at the detail of the judgment of itself, which of course specifically said that members of Palestine Action had engaged in acts of terrorism, but noted that actually had only been a few members who had done so. And so really this whole debate within the court was actually about whether it was proportionate to prescribe an entire organization as a terrorist organization just due to the fact that a few members had taken this action, which ultimately it decided it hadn't. It decided that actually the bar for prescribing a whole organization to be a terrorist organization should be significantly higher than that to deal with. And actually, as a result, the government should be dealing with this as a criminal issue rather than a terrorism issue. But in terms of what happens next, we know the government plans to appeal to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal does have to give them permission for doing so. Of course, I think it's ultimately very likely that they will do so. And of course, in recognition of that, the High Court has ruled that the ban will stay in place for now. But even if the Court of Appeal upholds the decision of the lower court, it's still probably likely to go to the Supreme Court. So ultimately, this is a legal battle that will rage for a considerable amount of time, but also will rage in terms of being a politically charged issue at the same time.
What does that mean for then supporters of Palestine Action, especially those that have been arrested for supporting Palestine Action? If this ban is revoked, what happens to them?
Well, I think that's a really important question. I think the reality is, we did see a lot of people outside the High Court, part of Palestine Action, who were celebrating the decision. They were very emotional because they are kind of quite tied to that specific organization, that cause. But I think in reality, a lot of those people would be quite disappointed that the High Court didn't go further in terms of showing more sympathy towards them. In fact, the High Court judgment did actually specifically say that they didn't have too much sympathy for those people who'd already been arrested, due to the fact that actually it was very clear what the consequences for those people would be. And really, since the ban came into force, we've seen around 3,000 people arrested at various protests, holding up banners saying, we support Palestine Action. We've also seen dawn raids, and we know that there are thousands of people who are still waiting for criminal charges to be laid against them. And so ultimately, that is not something that's going to be hugely affected by this decision to that it found that the ban wasn't lawful. So I think ultimately those people are still in risk of prosecution by the UK's judicial and law enforcement system. But ultimately, we do know that if the ban is ultimately lifted, let's say by higher courts, that ultimately those people will be free from those charges.